Carl Jung talked about this phenomenon. He described as retrogressive restoration of the persona. And so it's a complicated idea, but basically what it means is that sometimes you take a leap forward and you learn some things, but you can't catalyze a new identity, so you try to go back and hide in your old identity. And that actually doesn't work because, well, things have changed and you've learned something and that isn't who you are anymore. And so it's like you have to cut parts of yourself off in a destructive manner to fit back into the person that you were. Now what happens here is that Pinocchio escapes from this tyrannical situation and undergoes this descent into chaos, but he tries to go back home. He tries to go back to what he was, and he can't do that anymore. His father isn't at home anymore. And so when he goes home, he finds that there's no home there. Now, this happens to people sometimes, and it's often a shock to them. So one of the things I've noticed about Peter Pan type, I'm going to speak about men here because I've observed it more in men, is that they'll often stay under the thumb of their father. And you think, well, why would someone do that? Because it means they're subject to the tyrannical judgment of their father. They're always concerned about what their father would think or whether their father approves of them, and so forth. And you think, well, that's got to be an unpleasant place to be. Why would you do that? One of the things that I've suggested to my clients and to other people sometimes is that here's a weird little exercise that you can undertake, a little thought experiment. So you have your parents, and of course your parents have friends who are about their age, and maybe some of them are people you only know peripherally. And I might ask you, well, do you care more about what your parents think than you care about what these peripheral people who know your parents think? And then the answer to that is, well, of course. And then the question that arises out of that is, why? I mean, for someone else, your parents are the peripheral people, and their parents are central. Like, why is it logical that your parents' opinion makes any more difference to you than the opinion of some randomly selected people who are approximately that age? Why is it the case that you would consider that they would know more than someone else? I mean, I know they know you better, and fair enough, but that's not the point. And then another point there is that to the degree that your parents' opinion about you matters more than some randomly selected people of approximately the same age, Jung would say, well, you haven't exactly separated out the God image from your parents, and so you're still under that combination. It's like, it's a complicated thing to talk about, but think about the Harry Potter series. Harry has two sets of parents, right? He's got the Dursley parents, and then he's got these like magical parents that sort of float behind, and he should know the difference between them. They shouldn't be one and the same. They're not for him. And it's like, well, you have your parents and you have nature and culture as parents, and you shouldn't be thinking that your parents are nature and culture as well. They shouldn't have final dominion over you. It means that you're not an individual yet, if that's the case. Freud said, for example, that no one could be a man unless his father had died. And Jung said, yes, but that death can take place symbolically. Okay, so there's that part of the idea. And then another part of the idea is, one of the times in your life when you actually realize that you're an individual is when you'll go and ask your parents something and you'll realize they actually don't know any more about what you should do than you do. And that sucks. And that's partly why people are often willing to maintain a tyrant-slave relationship with their father. It's like, on the one hand, you have to be inferior in a relationship like that. You know, you've always got the judge watching you. But on the other hand, there's always someone who knows what to do. There's always someone standing between you and the unknown that you can go ask, what should I do? Well, at some point, you'll realize that the reason you can't ask that anymore is because they actually don't know any more than you do. And then that's a pain. Like that is a symbolic death. And that's also when you establish a more individual relationship with your parents. It's at that point that you could conceivably start taking care of them instead of the reverse. And that's a time that should come. But you have to let that image of perfection go. And that exposes you. Well, that's what happens here. You know, Pinocchio goes home and he wants things to be the way they were, and he wants to stay under the careful care of the benevolent father, but that's no longer possible. He's past that point, and that's why the father has disappeared. And so Geppetto has gone off to look for Pinocchio because he also needs his son, but in any case the house is abandoned. And so then we see inside the house that everything's covered with cobwebs and everything's gone, and Pinocchio and the cricket sit on the steps and they're very concerned. First of all, they wonder where he went, so they're actually concerned that he's gone, but they also don't know what to do because there's just no going home. And so, you know, that's also the case that once you hit a certain point in your development, well, it's the same thing we already talked about. The answers that you're looking for are not going to be found in your parents' house. It's as simple as that. Now, you could artificially maintain your dependency, but, you know, if you do that for too long, things get pretty ugly. So you get pretty stale and you know, you're like bread that's been on the shelf for too long. So now they're wondering what to do and where he could be. And then there's something very strange happens. The star shows up again, and it turns into a dove, and the dove flies down and puts a piece of paper bathed in light with gold writing on it in front of the cricket and the puppet. So what in the world's going on there? Well, we know what the star is. We've seen it multiple times, right? It's also the place that the blue fairy came from. But it's this transcendent place. It's this place that occurs sort of as the ultimate ideal. And this time it delivers a message. So what's happening here is that Pinocchio is fundamentally oriented by the wish that his father made so long ago, right? And the wish was that he would become a fully functioning individual. And so that's that transcendent place. And Jung would say, when you orient your vision, different things appear to you in the world. So, and I mean this literally. So, because you can't see everything, your vision calculates what's necessary, your brain calculates what's necessary for you to see so that you get to the point that you're aiming at. And I don't mean that metaphorically, I mean it literally. Things that aren't relevant to what you're seeking, you won't see them unless they get in your way, and they have to really block your pathway before they'll be literally visible. So you orient yourself towards something, and that makes some things visible that wouldn't be visible, and makes other things invisible that you might have seen. And so when you change your orientation, what manifests itself in the world also changes. Now, Pinocchio is in despair here, and he asks himself, where could my father have gone? And so the question is, what exactly is he asking under those circumstances? And what he's asking is something like, I had a structure that was orienting me properly in relationship to the world. And as far as it was embodied in my actual father, it's now gone. Is there any possibility that I can find that again? And that is what you want. You see, like if you're in a chaotic circumstance, maybe you've escaped, let's say, from a bad relationship or something like that, and you're out of it, but now you don't know what to do. What you're hoping is that you can get your life back together, right? That you can put the pieces that have fallen apart back together. And so you're automatically going to generate a fantasy about producing another, let's call it stable state. You're going to be looking for the spirit that would enable that stable state to be generated. Because really what it is, in some sense, is your new personality. You're in chaos, you have to become something new in order to get out of chaos. And so you're hoping for that, you're hoping that you'll see it. And so that's going to make certain things visible to you. That's the proper way of thinking about it. You know, when you get curious about something, and maybe you're curious about something and you walk into a bookstore, that curiosity is going to guide you to a certain set of books. The fact that you have the question in mind is going to open your eyes to certain kinds of possibilities. And so if your goal is to reestablish your union with the positive father, let's say, then certain things are going to appear and other things aren't. And that's really what this represents. the transcendent star is the goal, which is this developmental process, it's capable of, let's say, delivering a message to you. In some sense, that's what's happening when you're thinking, you know, because you have a problem you want to solve, you have somewhere you want to go with your thoughts, and as a consequence of that, information reveals itself to you in the interior landscape. It's a very strange thing. You know, in some sense it feels as if you're producing the thoughts, but it could equally be said that you're watching the thoughts reveal themselves. And which of those is the more accurate description is by no means obvious. You can certainly have thoughts that surprise you, which is very strange. It's like, they're your thoughts. How in the world can they surprise you? But they do. So it's like you didn't know them before you thought them up. And then the question is, well, where did they come from if you didn't know them before you thought them up? They sort of spring out of the void. That's one way of thinking about it. Anyways, this is a Holy Ghost symbol, this dove as well. So that puts some Christian imagery in here again. You could think of it as a manifestation of the spirit of transformation. That's another way of looking at it. Anyways, it's the conscience that interprets the letter. So it's sort of figuring out what the next thing should be. And weirdly enough, what the letter says is that Geppetto was out looking for Pinocchio and he got swallowed by a whale, which makes very little sense, to put it bluntly. Geppetto went to search for Pinocchio, and now he's at the bottom of the sea in a giant whale. And we leap right over that tremendous gap in logic and follow the story nonetheless. Okay, so what's the idea here? The idea is that if you fall into a chaotic state and everything falls apart, there's the possibility that things can come back together, including what you've just learned, in a new state. And so you can conceptualize that symbolically as the existence of the dead father at the bottom of the chaotic landscape. That's the proper way, as far as I can tell, to think about it. It's like there's something down there that's capable of reforming and re-emerging, that incorporates the previous state, but that takes it farther. And you're not going to find that unless you descend into this chaotic place where it feels like all order is gone. While you generate order, it's going to be akin to the order that you had before, but there's going to be something new about it as well. So it's down to the bottom of the chaotic state to bring up what you're missing. And that's one level of analysis. Another level of analysis you think is, well, that's also what you're doing, that's what you should be doing in principle when you're going to university. You know, you come to university in roughly the same state as Pinocchio. You know, you're a bit of a puppet and you're kind of a jackass, and what the hell do you know? And it's chaotic because you haven't found your place in the world properly. And I don't mean merely for career, not that that's not relevant, because it is, but it's more important than that. It's because you're a historical creature, because you are a product of history. Unless you are enculturated properly, which means you understand your past, and in the sense that the humanities can allow for that, then you haven't been able to incorporate the wisdom of your ancestors into your day-to-day pursuits, and that's going to make you weak. That's the idea anyways. And so when you come to university, this is what university is for. It's so that you can go into the chaos and you can pull something out of it that's truly of value, and you can incorporate that in your own personality, and that makes you much, much stronger, like literally stronger, not more educated, but it's not like you know more facts. It's that you literally are a better person, and better means you can do far more things. You can articulate that's something that's of crucial importance, is that you can articulate yourself properly, which is more useful than anything else you could possibly manage. Like if you guys come out of university capable of making coherent arguments and using language properly, you're so powerful that it's ridiculous. You always